A 5-act play. It started in the East Nile.
Neither was Dad. I keep my emotions closer to the vest, just like Dad. I loved being with my children when they were young, as I still do now that they're grown, playing games just like Dad. One of my memories is playing Which Way. Dad would pile us all into the car when Mom needed a break and ask each of us one at a time which way to turn or to go straight. It's a miracle that we always ended up back at home. I also remember the yearly ritual of setting up the above-ground pools that we had, and once filled with water, we would push Dad into the pool with his clothes on. Dad kept us entertained with number puzzles, always stimulating our minds. He taught me the importance of a good education and to have a career that I loved, not just a job. He taught me how to use carpentry tools and how to pick a man to marry. Where is he? Just like him. It was painful to see Dad's cognition dwindle over the past year. He lost his ability to get into his computer. It was hard to see the strong man he once was become dependent on me and caretakers to get him out of bed and in bed and to take care of his every need. I am especially grateful to Joseph, Stella, and Frank, who made Dad's life in the end as comfortable and enriched as possible. They helped him with his every need following his fall and the discovery of a stage 4 bedsore. They brought him to happy hour daily, and even though his drinking had become less of an interest to him, imagine that, Jack Heller was limited to 2 drinks a day at happy hour, which was a Maplewood rule. And at his request, he was down to 1 drink a day and then no more drinking when he moved to Wingate Skilled Nursing Home on September 17th. I'm also grateful to Good Shepherd Hospice, who helped us understand the end of life for Mom and Dad. Lisa saw him daily after his discharge from Wingate and back to be with Mom at Maplewood. She worked miracles with the daily wound care and saw at the end to greatly Dad in his passing, as I was with our daughter Megan, son-in-law Jordan, and their 3-week-old baby Ayla. I'm happy that Dad and Mom are together again in eternity. My vision is of Mom driving up to the pearly gates in her red sports car, something that she always joked about wanting to buy, and bringing Dad to a party with Doug and Jonathan and Herb and the rest of the clan who were there already. So that's the end of mine, but now Art Bernstein, who is a computer science professor, wrote a eulogy and sent some notes that he has given me permission to share. He and his wife Edie came 2 weeks ago, but they just couldn't make the trip again. So Jack arrived here in 1970, at the time the computer science department was first formed. It was staffed by a small group of professors drawn from the electrical engineering, physics, and applied analysis departments, and was given a small digital equipment corporation computer, an even smaller budget, a lot of chalk to teach with, and he had the vision to see what needed to be done, the know-how to formulate a plan, and the energy to make sure that every detail of that plan was executed. It was no exaggeration to say that in a few years he shepherded a department that was a sleepy backwater to a position that has national recognition now. And then these are the notes from Art directly. Jack played a big role in my life. He and I arrived on campus at the same time. He was 15 years older than me, and I regarded him both as a friend and a mentor. He was someone I admired for the kind of person he was and for what he accomplished. His values were on target. I always knew that I could trust him to make the right decision. His energy where he wanted to go, his energy was unfailing. Whenever he set out to do something and he thought big, he'd leave no stone unturned to get to where he wanted to go. And he wasn't afraid to take actions along the way that he knew would ruffle some feathers. and his devotion to family was admirable. You were lucky to have him as a father. We visited them last year
in the East 90s in a small apartment that was secured by my mother's father, Hyman, and they were engaged, and it wasn't customary at the time to live with your fiance before marriage, so a quick marriage was scheduled, and that happened at the New York Statler, and they lived very happily in that apartment at 530 East 90th for several years. And then as they started to plan a marriage, it seemed like they'd need to expand to a house, so they moved to their second act in Englewood, and very near our dear friends, the Powells, and their kids, and they were like family to us, always have been. And then Dad had the good luck of moving to Stony Brook, because he had that wonderful job that he was offered at SUNY Stony Brook as chairman of the computer science department, and he thrived there, and he worked very, very hard. And that was 35 years. And their next act was New York, and that was the act that I'd like to talk most about, because that was the gift that I got. I wasn't sure how I felt about all of this, because I had lived in New York sort of on my own for so many years, and I asked my folks to do us a favor. We had a cat in our Upper West Side apartment, and we got a job that left both of us out of town, and we couldn't bring the cat with us, and so I asked around to see if anybody would want to house sit, and there were no takers, until my mother said, well, you know, your father and I would be happy to live in your apartment and take care of your cat. But, you know, by then, Mom was 79 and Dad was 82, and it seemed like a lot to ask. It was a walk-up apartment, but they were insistent, and so for the next 4 weeks, Mom and Dad lived there, and when we returned, they said, interesting news. We loved it so much here, we've decided to sell the house and move to New York. So, and that's what they did, because once plans were set, it all got into motion pretty quickly. And I think 3 weeks later, I got a call from Mom, and she said, honey, we've hired a real estate agent, and she's found an apartment 3 blocks from your place. And she paused and she said, too close? And as my friend Leslie Klein liked to remark, your mother would live on you if it were possible. So anyway, they found a beautiful apartment, actually with the help of my friend Diane, who was a real estate agent, and they lived for 11 beautiful years at 100 West 57th Street. We're lucky to have some of their friends here today from those wonderful times. And it was an interesting thing that happened. You know, it wasn't a marriage that was without contention. I mean, this was, sometimes it felt like a battleground. But in New York City, it's almost like they came back to each other, and they became most actualized there. And it was not uncommon for me to walk behind them, walking hand in hand to the theater or the museum or lectures, and they had really the time of their life. And for me, it was exceptional because I, at that time, was living on the Upper East Side, really a 20-minute bike ride from their house. And so I got to bike to my parents, and my favorite kind of trip to them was the unannounced one, where I would just sort of show up, and we would share dinner together, and we would eat around the family dinner table, and like old times. But it was just the 3 of us, and it was a glorious time. And my father was just excellent company. He was a very wise and very interesting man, very unusual, very mid-century man. He worked well with his hands, skills I never picked up, but I was always there with him. We collected rocks, and we would bird watch together. We'd go out to the local luncheonette and drink some hot chocolate together. And he was a very, very...
They're here.
They're here. He was a deeply sweet man, and I will miss him terribly. And I'm very touched that you're all here. And it's a hard goodbye, but it was a great run. And I just want to say his fifth act was with Kathy and Dan, and you were magnificent. The care you gave to Dad and Mom was extraordinary. And Joseph, Frank, and Stella were wonderful to them and gave them, I think, great care and filled them with optimism. And Lisa, I thank you so much for all you did for them. You gave them a lot of comfort in the end, and it was most appreciated. I will miss them. Thank you.
Thank Lisa and Joseph and Frank and Stella. And I think they got to know Mom and Pop very well. Mom and Pop were always very courteous. And of course, it was their job to do, but I really think that they did much more than the job. So we thank you. The first time Mom and Dad met, we've all heard the story, was on a park bench where Dad showed the beautiful starry night to Mom. Can you imagine a 23 and a 20-year-old sitting on a park bench in New York with all the entertainment possibilities, and Dad enthralled Mom in explaining what the constellations were, what the stars were, what the planets were, and I'm sure they even saw shooting stars. Let's fast forward to the day after Mom's funeral, when Joni and I were sitting with Dad, and we have this on recording. You can send me an email, I'll be more than happy to send it back to you. And Dad, at the end of the recording, said, that Mom brought me to the starry night. And this is how he said it. She knew I loved it. She brought me to the Museum of Modern Art, and we stood and we looked at the painting. Now this is an amazing painting, and in a very interesting way, I think that it sums up Dad's life. There's a beautiful evergreen tree on the left side. Dad was always into nature. He told me once that he remembers as a kid growing up on East 23rd Street between S and T in Brooklyn, that behind their house were meadowlands that stretched out to the ocean. And he used to go and catch frogs. In Stony Brook, he had that unbelievable natural garden with footpaths, a bird bath, even a bench to sit there. And I even think that once the neighbors complained about how messy the side of the lawn was, because he wasn't into manicure, he was into naturalism. And the tree in that painting is very dominant and very strong. And I think that represents Dad's professional successes that we don't even know what they were, because when Dad was working on the library for the United Nations computer system, he didn't really talk about his accomplishments. What he instilled in us was the ability and the desire to always want to do the best that we could. I remember he always said, if you can't do anything well, don't do it at all. And I think all of his children did do it well. And that was because of what Dad instilled in us. And I remember on the day after Mom's funeral, Ilana called, and Dad wanted to hold the phone by himself. Now, Ilana is the type of person that people find it easy to share with. And he started sharing about how much he missed Mom and how much of a great mother she was. And it was really very touching. Now, next to this gigantic evergreen tree is a little quaint, like European town, nestled in the mountains. And you know who the mother of that town was? You know who the mayor of the town was? The mayor of that town was Mom. She was the boss. 4 children, 9 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren.
14
already.
14, sorry. And in another few years, it's going to be another number.
15 in March.
So that was Mom. And Mom wanted Dad to come. Now, Dad passed away 13 days after Mom. Now, I've heard it's a primary number. I am not the mathematical type. In fact, the only reason I passed mathematics in high school is because Dad helped the mathematics teacher design the curriculum. So instead of getting an F, I got a D. D stands for dummy. But we have heard that Dad was involved in number theory, and there's a primary number. That means it's not indivisible by any other number. It's unique. And their relationship was unique. Now, in Hebrew, the numerical value of the word echad, which means 1, is 13. Mom and Dad were 1. They were indivisible. But there's another word in Hebrew that also has a numerical value of 13. And that's the word ahava, which means love. Now, Dad was not only a scientist, and he saw things as being obvious, and he told us on the day after Mom's funeral that Mom helped him to communicate and to be in touch with his feelings. But Dad was not totally a number person. He also had very deep feelings which came out in very interesting ways. So now I'm going to share an unbelievable story that, and I want to give you the time frame. Now remember, we're talking mathematics. Dad was a mathematician. Okay, so as we know, the world was created in the year 0. We, the Jewish people, left Egypt in the year 1312 BCE. We had coming into Israel. We had the first temple. The second temple was destroyed. Dad and Mom came to Israel the first time to visit us in the Jewish year 5742. That's 1,912 years after the destruction of the second temple, where there remained just the wall, the #1 tourist attraction. in his room. That was in 1982. And we went to the wall, and then we stood back from the wall in the plaza overlooking the wall. And I remember this like yesterday. Dad said, "My whole life I've wanted to be cremated and my ashes thrown out of an airplane over Sullivan County where I played as a Boy Scout. But now that I've been to the wall, I want to be buried in the traditional Jewish manner." And here we are today, doing that because, just like that evergreen tree, dominant and reaching up into the starry sky, when Dad decided to do something, he did it. Now, most of that painting is stars, in fact, 11 stars, and a moon surrounded by like a halo. And the stars in that painting are just sparkling. And that was Dad. He was a great father. And he sparkled with very interesting ways of bonding with his kids. I remember he taught me how to wrestle. And he taught me some really good moves. And I remember also that once he was very good in carpentry in his hands. We built this gigantic dreidel together. And it was in the local newspaper. Father and son build dreidel. And there was also shooting stars. Shooting stars was what Kathy referred to in the unbelievable Which Way game. Piling in the car, a lot of fun, just taking off, zooming down the road, each one, left, right, straight ahead. But in retrospect, no one ever chose to do a U-turn and go back. Because Dad was not a U-turn and going back person. He was like that tree in the painting, very big, robust, well situated in the ground and piercing the heavens. You know where Mom and Dad are now? I think I know where they are.
They're in the red sports car.
They're sitting wherever they are on a bench, and they're looking at the starry sky.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. After that, after 2 years, it's very hard to follow. That was so beautiful and so wonderful to hear. All that you said, I know about Jack, but to hear it from you was from the heart. I really thank you. Well, as you might all know, I knew Myra since the day I was born. I only knew Jack for 77 and a half years. Thus, I will be shorter than the last time. Jack, we all know about Jack's, and Tuvia certainly elaborated, his wonderful, wonderful abilities with the math and being able to do things with his hands, and the fun he did with the kids and all the math things and his jokes and his enjoyment of vodka. But he had really attributes that all the kids know, because he played math games with my kids also. But maybe what you don't know, although Tuvia alluded a little bit to it, was his really keen sense and enjoyment of music, art, and the things in that part of the world that were not mathematical. And one day, Myra, who was really a wonderful getting everybody together, said we should do more together. We should, the four of us, go to the theater. We all agreed and got tickets for Joseph Papp's public theater. And at the same time, we bought a condo, a timeshare, so we'd have a place to stay, because at that point hotels were extremely expensive. Not that they aren't now. At any rate, they came from Long Island, we came from Philadelphia, and we met in Manhattan, each taking about the same time to get there. We would have dinner across the street, talk, come back, see the play, go to our favorite coffee place, and talk forever about the play. Then we would return to the timeshare, not too far away, and we would talk again. But this time, what would we talk about? We already talked a lot about the play. And the next thing to talk about were the children. So we went one by one by one to where they were in life and what they wanted to do and what we were concerned about and the ups and downs. We really had quite a lot to talk about. And as you can tell, everything we said that was good all turned out. There they are, wonderful. But it was fun because we shared a lot and had a lot of comfort within each other. And we knew that whatever we said stayed within that circle of four. And I must say that the 6 years, we enjoyed that and got to know each other and talk in some ways in a different way than you do in a large party. All I can say is I'm really grateful that we had that time. It was so enjoyable. It was so real. It was so getting to know each other and really caring about each other and understanding each other. I'm very, very grateful for that, to say the least. I only wish it wasn't over. And then, unfortunately, all that, you know, happened in illness and other things, but we still had that within us. All I can say is Jack was a wonderful, wonderful brother-in-law. He was so caring and affectionate and warm toward me, and always cared about what was going on with me. I will miss him terribly, and I am grateful for having had him in my life. And it is really something to have a brother-in-law. We used to call ourselves the outlaw insiders because we were the ones that came into the family. But it was not in-law, it was the real thing, just as Jack was the genuine thing.
Thank you.
Jack's niece. And I really just want to say a few words about Jack and Myra as a couple. Because although they were certainly individuals, to me, they were Uncle Jack and Aunt Myra. And Uncle Jack and Aunt Myra is more than two people. We had a family, the Levines, the Hellers, the Cantors, that have a set of individuals, children that are our cousins. And the cousins are like one word, and they are all here. And I really think it's because of our parents that we have that. And Myra and Jack were such a solid couple and brought us all together. I really have to give Myra and Jack a lot of credit for that. And we had something called Hanukkah. And it didn't matter if Hanukkah was in the winter or the spring or was celebrated at Atlantic City. It was Hanukkah. And that really brought people together. And when I think about my Uncle Jack and Aunt Myra, I think about Englewood. And even though that's their house, I just realized, I thought it was my house. And then they moved, I think of it as 5 Talmadge Gate. And we would drive up, and I know it was their house, but I thought it was my house. And then they moved on to this great apartment in New York, and oh, well, I can remember them both sitting there thinking, we are so lucky. We are so lucky to have our health and to have New York City. And one of my great memories of Uncle Jack and Aunt Myra was I was in Myra and Jack's bedroom, and Myra was telling me all the things about New York, and we were looking at jewelry, and then she looked at the bed, and she said, and I want to speak to both Myra and Jack, she said, every night when we go to bed, we hold hands and we say, I love you. And I said, that's really nice, but why do you do that? And she said, because we know that one of us may not wake up the next day. And we wanted to say that to each other before we went to bed. So I want to have that second glass of wine that apparently Jack said he wouldn't have anymore. And I would like to toast my Uncle Jack and Aunt Myra. We really thank you.
We say that one of the wonderful things about living such a long life is that you get to affect not one but multiple generations in a family. And the day we heard that Jack died, I really wanted to think back before this 3-year period that was so hard, and I just want to go back to my earliest memories of Jack when he was young and vibrant, and they were about him engaging me with little games and tricks with your hands and funny things, and I had such a strong sense of them, but I couldn't remember them specifically. And so I said to my daughter, Julia, who's 14, I asked her about them because I knew he did them with her too. And I said, Julia, do you have any memory of those Uncle Jack finger game things? And she said, sure. And she, in short order, rattled off in detail 6 of them.
Wow.
And I won't go through all 6, but she was really pleased with this one. It made her very popular in the 1st grade. She taught that to all her friends. See, I'm not even very good at it anymore. But when she taught that to all of her friends. And then my favorite is if you take 2 fingers and come towards like this, at a certain point you get a 3rd floating finger in the center, which is really amazing, and you should all try later. I know that Julia's gonna, if Julia has children, I know she's gonna teach those to her, to the children, all 6 of those things. And I know she's gonna teach them to your children, all the little ones who are in the family now. And these may seem like small things, but these are how memories live on. These are legacies in family of times. It's not just the finger games. It's the quiet time with your uncle off on the side of the party when you're a kid and when you're bored and when he can sense that and when he calls you over to do these little things with you. And so I want to thank Uncle Jack for being that kind of perceptive, loving uncle, and I will miss him terribly, and I will miss Auntie Myra and Uncle Jack as a pair terribly.
Okay, I'm going to talk about memories that I have of Jack and Myra. Okay, I wrote here a whole thing about math, but everyone spoke about that. But I did want to say that me and math do not mix well together. However, Jack taught me to see beyond the math. I learned from Jack to always look forward and take action. Even if life is hard, always to find a way through the hard times. Growing up, okay, I can't see. Growing up, we always looked forward to our visits coming to America. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to acknowledge what Myra and Jack did to us, Heller families from Jerusalem who were very different. And I just want to say that is not, we should not take it for granted the fact that when we came, they opened a whole kosher kitchen in their garage, and that everywhere we went, and not only Myra and Jack, this whole family, like I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you guys for doing that. I also loved listening to classical music with Jack in Stony Brook, in the dining room off the kitchen, in that huge
piano room. Fireplace.
Yeah, by the fireplace. I have like really special memories of that. And also when I first moved to New York, Saba was extremely helpful and resourceful, and I'm forever grateful for that. I am also very sad that I lost 2 influential people in my life, but very happy for them that they are together. I will miss them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a granddaughter-in-law of Jack and Myra, married to Nick, but I just wanted to say a couple things because I I hadn't processed Myra's death 2 weeks ago, and I think it's because to me they were like this one organism, if that makes sense. And when Myra passed, it was like, well, half of her is kind of still alive in Jack, and so it was almost like they were both still there in some sense. And now that Jack has passed, I think it's all just, they were just this one being, in my opinion. And I came in during Act 4, the best one, and I really hit the jackpot. I suddenly had these two grandparents who were so open and so welcoming and so loving, and I had never had that. And I mean, I hit the jackpot with you too, but, but really it was Myra and Jack. And I just remember, you know, Jan, you said a lot of what I wanted to say too, but the Hanukkah parties and the way that they just brought everybody in together, and I think we're all going to continue to do that. I mean, when I look around here, I say this is what they created. They created this community and this family, and what better legacy to leave behind, really. And we're all going to continue to reflect that, and to continue to be together and to be a close family. And I think we completely have, from what I can tell from the last 11 years, I think we really have them to thank for that. And that's really an amazing thing, that a gift that they have bestowed on their whole family. You know, Jack was always the more obviously quiet one between him and Myra would always ask all these questions, and she really would dig deep as to what's going on in your life, and Jack just kind of would sit back and take it in, and he was just so easygoing and so accepting, and just everybody was welcome, and he was such a calming presence, I think. And that's what I'll remember about him, besides of course the highly rated wine, brie wheels larger than my head, and I just really hope that wherever they are, they have all those things, and they have each other, and that's the most that they can ask for. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia's the more social one of the two of us, and by proxy, I think inherited a lot of Myra in her. But it's no surprise that I feel like I have a lot more in common with Grandpa, and I always have. We're in similar lines of work, and you know, the last few years we were able to talk about, he would always pull me aside and talk about his latest discoveries and theories he's thinking about prime numbers, and ask me about my work, but it goes back farther than that. I have a really clear memory of, geez, how old? I don't know, you know, preteens. Grandma and Grandpa came to visit us in Boston, and Grandpa came upstairs to have one of our math talks, like we would every time we got together. And I remember being very annoyed because Saved by the Bell was on. I was really offended there for a few moments. But of course, now I've really come to appreciate and value that connection and the attention that he always, you know, that connection we had. So everyone knows that Grandpa was a pioneer in computer science, and I tell my friends and my coworkers that my grandfather was chair of the computer science department, and everyone is impressed. And you know, they say, "Oh, yeah, it's surprising. It's hard to get your head around working on computers in the 60s when you know, he really saw an immense amount of progress, but in contrast to the stereotype of the socially awkward engineer who can only talk about their work and really only driven by that one thing, solving that problem or whatever it is, he had a very wide variety of interests, as we've been hearing from everybody, between art and music and film and gardening, and I've been watching all the birds flying over here. I think he really would have enjoyed that. But you know, being a mathematician, I think he would have wanted to quantify that. So I want to tell you about a thing everybody knows about the Bacon number. It's like a game that actors and, you know, people in that world play about, because Ed Baker, what's his name? Kevin, the less famous one, was so prolific. You know, you try to figure out how many movies it takes to connect any person to Kevin Bacon. And there's a similar game that mathematicians play with a guy named Paul Erdős, who's I think he was a Hungarian maybe. He's a very interesting, charismatic guy, and also very, very prolific. Would just travel around the world and work on papers with all kinds of people. So it's a very high mark among mathematicians to have a low Erdős number, to have a low number of connections in papers co-authored with people. And so the internet, being what it is, realized that there are these two communities that play these two games and have gone looking for people that have the lowest Bacon-Erdős number, which is the sum of the two numbers. And Greg, knowing Ed Bacon, I don't know how we want to count that, but I'm sure with the amount that Grandpa published, I'm sure his Erdős number must be very low. So I'm thinking that Carl Sagan and Winnie Cooper were coming for you here. But I had one more thing to say. I was reading that article that Greg mentioned. I was reading an article about some work that Grandpa did in connecting museums so that they could share their catalogs and their databases. And there's a quote in there that Grandpa said that he thought that computers were going to create a new generation of Renaissance people. I think he said Renaissance man, but in that he realized the potential that they could creep into all of these humanities and the arts and enable people in those fields or enable anybody who has an interest in those fields to contribute and to participate. And I don't know if he was right in that prediction, but I know he really believed in it, and I know he embodied it, and I think that he really saw, or I'll say I really see him as that modern Renaissance man of having such wide and interesting interests. So yeah, I'll miss him a lot.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Share some memories? Rob. Oh, I forgot Rob. Sorry, Rob, you're here on my list.
I'm Rob. So she sent me an email of some brief remarks. There it is. I very much wanted to be with you today to honor Jack. He was my father-in-law for 17 years, and many of those years he was my only dad figure. When I first met Jack, he was delighted to introduce me to the wonders of Camembert and Brie. I came from a strictly American cheddar family, and this was a whole new world for me. I loved drinking wine with Jack and loved the delight he took in choosing just the right wine to bring to us when he came to visit, along with flowers from his garden. I loved how relaxed he was and that he could fall asleep while everyone was buzzing around him. When Jonathan takes Teddy outside to garden, I always think of Jack scooping up the boys and taking them outside to his wondrous yard, unlike any other in his neighborhood. Jack would tirelessly meet us halfway at the Thomas Edison rest stop on the New Jersey Turnpike so that he and Myra could enjoy Greg and Rob for a weekend. I remember Jack telling the same jokes for years and getting the same groans from his family and encouraging everyone to go for a walk after a long meal in their beautiful dining room in Stony Brook. I so admire the life that he and Myra made. With their passing so close, I would like to thank them both at this time for the cheese, and by that, I mean all of the things that both Myra and Jack introduced to me. Theater subscriptions, Broadway opening nights, the fascinating people in their lives, the trip to London for our 10th anniversary, the Hamptons, Dennis, the generosity toward me that continued over the years, and the best gift, their continued presence in my life. I'd forgotten about the jokes, but does anybody remember the one with the horse that plays baseball? Yeah.
The groaner.
They were touched.
We'll tell that one later if you haven't heard it. So I had this memory. I was probably, I don't know, 9 or 10. And does anybody remember this? It was in Stony Brook or somewhere nearby, and we all wore these plastic hats that were supposed to look like boaters. Remember this? And it was to honor Jack. Yeah, it was, because I remember that he had a bunch of work colleagues who gave speeches, and they gave him a plaque. I don't remember if it was for a birthday or what have you, but I remember this was the first time growing up that it really struck me that my grandpa was kind of a big deal. And so later, as I learned a little bit more about, his important scholarship, the computer programs that he made to connect connect museums across the country, saw him written up in newspaper articles. It was really amazing how little he talked about himself and his work, and how modest and humble he was. I mean, he really was one of the pioneers in computer science, and he talked very little about it. And so my memories of him, I definitely remember him working on his mainframe and taking me into the university from time to time when he had to work on the weekends. But for the most part, he was just Grandpa Jack. And so my memories of him were planting bulbs in the garden in Stony Brook, which was really a jungle, for those of you who remember that. He took me to the pancake house and made me work for my breakfast. We had to do math problems and logic problems on the paper napkins before I could get my pancakes. And I remember one day he said, "Can you have 2 infinity?" And I said, "No, infinity means forever." And he said, "You can have 2 infinity. Here's how. You have 1 infinity people walking north-south, and you have infinity people walking east-west. 2 infinity."
A while to get.
I remember he took me to the bird sanctuary, and there was a bird sitting on a wire, and he said that was a phoebe. And I said, "How do you know it's a phoebe?" And he says, "Because it sits on the wire." I don't think that's the only bird that sits on a wire.
Oh, okay.
I remember doing carpentry projects, and what was it? His father or
His father.
His father's old carpentry set with all the wooden tools.
Mike.
Mike, that's right. Yeah. And I also remember his love of classical music. He was always playing The Trout by Schubert. And so those are the kinds of memories that I have about him. But the things that I really admire about Grandpa Jack, 1, his humility and modesty. 2, he had an amazing and fierce sense of social justice and moral compass, which he distilled in me throughout my life. And finally, he had this amazing ability to just relax and let things go with the flow. Does anybody remember, I think it was the 65th wedding anniversary that was in the hotel in New York? And he said, people have been asking me what's the secret to my 65 years of marriage. Does anybody remember what he said?
Do what Myra tells me to.
Just give in. But I think of it more as going with the flow than giving in. And I feel like in this hectic world that we live in, or a hectic Hanukkah party with all kinds of things going on, just the ability to sit back and sip a glass of vodka is so necessary, and he could always do that. But the last thing that I thought most recently when I heard that he had passed, and I know it's common for couples to pass close to each other, but I was surprised. I thought he was gonna hold on for a little longer. And I loved Kathy's visions of seeing if he could get to Cape Cod and picturing him sitting out in the sun. But the thing that struck me after that thought was, what more could you ask for from life? I mean, he had an amazing career. He influenced so many students. I don't know if you know this, but SUNY Stony Brook has a scholarship in his name, the Jack Heller Award. He influenced countless students. He influenced his field greatly. He had this amazing marriage to Myra for, 72 years. He had this amazing family who he loved so much. His life was so full of art and culture and music and travel. And he lived 96 years of this. Jack Heller's life was really one to celebrate. I don't think there's anything more that any of us could ask for from life. So, holding up a vodka or a glass of wine that's rated 92 in Wine Advocate. Here's to Jack. May we all live such a beautiful, long, and happy life. Goodbye, Grandpa. I'll miss you dearly.
Thank you.
Grandpa Jack's roommate in the 4th chapter. They moved to New York the same year that I moved to New York to go to NYU. And they stole my thunder a little bit there. My freshman roommates had dinner at their apartment. I had probably over 20 rehearsals in that apartment. My friends from Indiana have been in that apartment. I was just looking through the pictures I have of all the people I've taken to that apartment and shared them with, and it was pretty astounding. During my summers during grad school, I lived with Myra and Jack. And if you were ever in the apartment, I stayed in the back room, which was the computer room, which was Jack's room. So I was sort of the interloper there. And what would happen is every morning at about 5 a.m., I would hear his cane coming down the hall to go to his bathroom. Even though they had two, he insisted on going to the one that was in the room I was in. And I would look up and he would be completely nude, aside from the cane. And he would say, "Good morning, Robert," and go into the bathroom. And then I would hear his other struggles for about 20 minutes. So this was my wake-up call every morning for, in total about a year of my life between 3 summers. The other thing he would do is at like 2 in the morning, if he wasn't sleeping well, he would come into the computer room and play solitaire with me there, sleeping, or formerly sleeping. And we would talk. He would sneak into the dining room at night and eat cheese, and sometimes I'd find him there when I came home late. And he was very different from Myra, and everyone would think that I was closer with Myra because I'm a theater person and I love art, but I really appreciated Grandpa's simplicity, the way he'd talk about things honestly and he'd think about what he said to you. Grandma said a lot of things, many, many things, and Grandpa said far fewer things, but sometimes they were even more profound. I loved how he talked about my plays, simply, clearly, sometimes a week after. I loved how he would have arguments at the dinner table. I got to see this between Myra and Jack, and watching them fight taught me a lot. I didn't have a traditional upbringing in terms of parents. I had 2 sets of step-parents, and I didn't really see fighting as much, which in my acting career became a problem because I didn't know how to be confrontational. My acting teachers yelled at me, and I finally got to see constructive confrontation between 2 people. They never left at the end of an argument angry at each other. And it was amazing that I got to learn from them in that way. They were very worried about me and my employment because I was in the arts, and I had about 17 jobs over the times I stayed with them, and they were always really worried. And I'm a little disappointed but also proud that this past week I got my first full-time job. It's only for 6 months, but I have benefits. And it happens to be as the computer science advisor, which I know nothing about except through Grandpa and my dad. And I think there's some sort of kismet there. And meeting these students and channeling him and his energy as I talk to them about Linux and Python
and calculus. I didn't have to take a single math class at NYU. I didn't have to take a single science class. Somehow I've ended up here, and I think it's a sort of beautiful thing, and I get to channel Jack every day of my life, and I'm really proud, and I'm really going to miss him. I'm sad I don't get to share it with him.
I'm married to a relative, my dear wife Janet, and I just want to say a little bit about Myra, a little bit about Jack. Myra and Jack were just two very accepting people. I mean, it's a wonderful quality. Accepting, non-critical. I mean, he was a guy who was a genius for sure, but you never felt diminished by anything you said. There was no comparison. And he was not only, I mean, we shared so many interests, science, math. I minored in math in college, but I mean, he was, of course, way beyond anything I knew. But he would share his science with me. He would share his museum projects. You know, even ones you haven't spoken about, the early ones, where they couldn't figure out what they had in the museums, and he helped them. He was a helper, and it was fun for him. He enjoyed. I mean, he was, you know, people have work, but he enjoyed his work, and he was a Renaissance man, and he was a mensch. And I can't say, I can't express it any better than a mensch. So, a wonderful guy, and I miss the guy, and he was whatever you were doing. I mean, I had some interesting legal cases. He would always ask me about them. He cared about who you were, what you were doing, and was willing to share, even if you didn't understand it. I mean, he had a new theory about relativity that we spoke about on and on, which I think was a little off, a little wacky, but it was okay. It was okay. He was willing to think beyond the box, and a great guy, and I'm going to miss him.
Thank you.